That is what a constitution must be. And having set the objective of the constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We've got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Good night to all our viewers and to the Globespan team and Nohar Singh and the rest of the Globespan family. A very good night to you all. Tonight, friends, we want to look at the differing dimensions in Guyanese politics while focusing on small parties in big politics. Guyanese politics have always been seen to be an interesting expose of personalities that tended to have created more psychological dysfunction than one of congenial uniqueness. We have had more than 50 years of independence, and the parade of political leadership has shown how political power changes some of the most charming personalities into frightening, corrupt, immoral, and repulsive persons bent on kicking the constitution of this country and our laws into oblivion, while ensuring that they and their friends benefit wholesomely from the largesse of the state and also while sitting on the backs of students, pensioners, and taxpayers. However, with each election, we have had many who believe that they can make a better contribution to the country, and their leadership and skills would proffer Guyanese a better chance in uplifting themselves. This is a good sign of the maturity of Guyanese as a people, that new groups can fancy their chances at making this country better and challenging the status quo so that we can all have our voices heard. While our previous years have been dominated by large parties in a small economy, our future promises to completely reverse this. It is now a matter of small parties and a large economy. Our immediate and future wealth is at stake. And as Guyanese, we must ask ourselves whether we'll continue to thrust those who have failed completely to manage small resources. How can they manage larger resources? And so, to add to the political dialogue and to add to the number of political choices we have at the upcoming elections, a number of new parties have sprung up that promises to be different from the PPP, PNC kind of monopoly we have gotten used to. And tonight, we're going to take a look at this paradigm of small parties and big politics. We will meet some of the personalities who have recently created new parties or been part of new parties' creation and who fancies their chances at making an impact at the upcoming polls in 2020. We have representatives, to our viewers out there, we have representatives from 3 parties tonight. And we will in future shows be bringing representatives from the other parties for a similar chat. Here tonight, we have the new movement, the Citizenship Initiative, and Change Guyana, and we have representatives from them. And rather than me introducing them, I'm going to ask the representatives here tonight to introduce themselves and the role they play in the parties that would have been recently launched. And let me start by asking Mr. Durga to go first. Sir, could you kindly introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us about your role in your party?
Yes, good evening, viewers and listeners. I'm Turendorga. I'm one of the people who met this young group of people in Guyana. It started from doctors who are in the rural areas, in the lesser developed areas, and they managed to take me around and show me the level of poverty and misery going on there. And the reason they approached me is because I put out a, a script, a document of about 100 pages,
Mhm.
where which I called the roadmap to prosperity. And what I did was an analysis of how we can take this economy back on track, as we did in the
So
beginning of the 90s.
we'll get to your vision and your aims just now. Just what role do you play
Okay,
do I have the name
I'm
correct? Is it the new movement?
yes, the name of the party is the New Movement. They have done a soft launch over the internet, and on the 14th they will have the official launch. And I'm one of their advisors.
Wonderful. Okay, Mr. Durga, welcome to the show. Let me go to Mr. Roel Johnson next. Roel.
Hi. Yeah. Um, what is now the Citizenship Initiative as a political entity started about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, as a primary civic education initiative. What I did was I contacted a couple of people who I knew to have a civic side to their activity, who've been involved in community work, who've been involved in education, and said, how this thing is shaping up, we need to make an intervention. Um, there are some people who were ready to go ahead with it as a political entity. We held off on that and said, let's see how the environment develops. And after a year of extremely dysfunctional political fighting between the two major groups, in which a great deal of misleading information was being distributed on both sides, we decided that if it is that we were going to put forward any meaningful civic education initiative, it would mean nothing if there were not a political component in order to see it through.
So what role you serve presently in the Citizenship Initiative?
Well, we don't follow a formal party structure. Our current goal is to ensure there's policies brought to the people. I serve as one of the coordinators. I look specifically we have 6 pillars to deal with. I look at I think the core one, which is constitutional reform and governance. And we have other people who look at other specific areas. So there's no formal structure. Yeah.
Very well, thank you. And my apologies, just before I ask Nigel to give his introduce himself and tell us a little bit of what role he's playing. My apologies, I didn't mean to put anybody in a spot, but just want to ensure that you guys are empowered by your parties to speak on their
yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
So Nigel.
Hi, thank you, Durga. My group Change Guyana was launched yesterday, 29th October. My role in the party is the prime ministerial candidate, with Robert Badal as the presidential candidate. And our formation came about after months of discussion, going back as far as February with Robert Badal. And we felt that we could no longer sit on the sidelines with what was unfolding in Guyana, not just in 2019, but really over decades of mismanagement and the reality of our country having the lowest GDP per capita in the English-speaking Caribbean and the extreme levels of poverty. So it really came to a point where we felt we should get involved and try to advance Guyana's economic development.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. And gentlemen, welcome to Globespan's program. I'm hoping that we have an engaging discussion tonight because I would like to have our viewers be introduced to, the vision and aim that you have in your party. And, we're going to get down to a little bit more nitty-gritty of the economics and stuff, discussion about economics and oil and all of that. But for now, I would like to extend 2 to 3 minutes to each one of you. If you can share with us, and again, I'm going to go in the same order, Mr. Durga, if you don't mind going first. If you can share your vision, what makes you special, what value you're bringing. I'm going to give you, let's say, 3 minutes each to tell us what makes you special, what value are you bringing to the table at this juncture in Guyana's history. Mr. Durga.
Well, for us, it's very simple. Because I'm involved with this young group of professional Guyanese, there was one thing very clear for me. These youngsters, and these are educated Guyanese, are saying that 50 years of the old politics, which was basically a two-party system, and the disappointment which these people, who most of them or all of them has voted for the now coalition and are feeling kind of shafted, that what they had expected and what we run on, which was that we would take care of the youth and put them first, it did not happen. So these youngsters now have grouped themselves and have said that, you know what, while we respect the older generation, we want to do it ourselves. And they have surrounded themselves with a lot of older guys, but as advisors. So it is for the first time these very young people take the lead, and they come from all walks of life. They took the roadmap to prosperity, which is basically the manifesto, but they're so sick and tired of this word manifesto because they perceive it as a book of promises which will not be kept anyway. So they're running on an economic program. The reason for that is that they're telling the electorate that these are the solutions we have. So instead of doing what was always done, a summary of all the miseries what we have and promises made, they change it around with a roadmap where they have specific projects, which are most of them are already in the pipeline, which have to be implemented immediately. And the reason why I got involved is because before the 2015 election, I had already put proposals like to introduce hemp as a major crop here, to build the oil refinery to reduce energy costs, and then the whole scala of other projects, the infrastructure, the deep harbor wharves, which are all necessary to develop this economy. So based on that economic program they are running, their campaign is completely different than from the old parties. They're absolutely not in people bashing and bringing back old things. They're saying that it is very clear the old parties are talking enough about themselves, so the electorate knows that. We don't want to get involved in that. We want to tell people what the economic programs are.
Great. So your focus is on the on building the economy, on developing such economic models that you'll be selling to the Guyanese public during the hustings, right? That's what you're saying.
Correct, but it's of course it's more than that. For instance, the refinery, while everybody is talking about reducing energy costs, everybody talks about a green economy and this and the other and so forth, but nothing is working. For instance, the Mabaruma solar energy plant is a joke. You understand? So with the oil refinery, which is being implemented as we speak, you understand, and which we see the government is trying their utmost to frustrate it by peddling lies like oh, the local refinery wants subsidized oil, that sort of thing. We never asked for subsidized oil. As a matter of fact, we want to be free to buy, whether from Exxon, Tullow, and so forth, out of the Guyanese part of the production.
Okay.
So, and hemp, we put hemp on the table before the election. They said it would be compared to marijuana, and it was held back. After the election, we have ministers like Holden who are claiming that they know everything about hemp, but they are blaming that the president or the government, or I don't know what it is not ready as yet for it. Well, the whole of America is for it. Last year, December, Mr. Trump signed it into law. Canada is the largest exporter in this hemisphere, and in Guyana we're sitting and turning thumbs, doing nothing. So these youngsters have said, you know what, we don't have that much faith. We respect the older generation, but we're going to do it ourselves this time, and I support them in that thought because
Great.
I know what they're feeling.
Yeah, well, thank you. We'll come back to you in a couple of minutes. So to our viewers watching on looking, this is Mr. Durga. He is from the New Movement, and if I may be so presumptuous as to quickly summarize, they're focusing on economic development and developing new economic policies, and to what's the right word here, but to exploit on the potential of hemp as one of the major development areas for Guyana. So thank you, Mr. Durga. We'll be back to you in a couple of minutes. Let me go to Mr. Johnson. Ruel, if you can tell us a little bit in 3 minutes, what's your party's goal, what's your vision, and maybe a couple of things about what makes you special and different.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that Mr. Durga brought up the youth thing. One of the key impetuses for us entering this is the complete absence of meaningful involvement by young people in policy making and policy decisions currently. I'm the second oldest person, I believe, in the group, and I'm 39. The other old person is 40. What we've done, we've come up with 6 key pillars on which we'll be proceeding through the next legislative session, because we're in this to ensure that we are part of the legislature and that we impact laws that are being put in place, as well as general policy. So the first pillar has to do with what we call participatory citizenship, enhanced governance, and public accountability, which we're going to be looking at issues like constitutional reform, justice sector reform, and introducing what needs to be introduced at this point in time, which is we call cyber sovereignty, digital transformation. Sort of buttress the participatory citizenship and public accountability in general. Definitely, this is our first pillar, and that applies to the next 5 pillars, which the second one has to do with economic diversification and growth. The third one has to do with what we call infrastructure for the future. Then there's education and human resource development, social cohesion, security and equity, and then there's, of course, what we call international leadership. In essence, what we want to do in every single sector is to provide a general legislative agenda from March of 2020 up until such time as the next parliament ends. We intend to leverage our presence in parliament, and I hope going forward that there's going to be some sort of cooperation agreement, if not coalition, with the smaller parties. But we certainly need, whatever the outcome is, that on these progressive programs, Mr. Durga's hemp idea, for example, is something that we believe in, that we can include in our agenda going forward. The sort of public accountability that Mr. Hines brings, with his accounting background, has to be integrated into our plans for governance reform in Ghana. So that's it in a nutshell. We could look at specific programs on the various sectors as we go ahead in the interview.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Ruel. So for our viewers out there, Ruel Johnson representing the citizenship initiative that has started its actions by capturing or seeking to capture a youth involvement, youth vision, and their hope is to look at economic diversification, infrastructural development, education, social cohesion, and so forth. So we'll get more into it in a couple of minutes' time, and I'd like to now go to Mr. Nigel Hines, who is from the Change Guyana Party, which was launched 24 hours ago. Sir, if you could share with us, you know, a little bit of your vision and aim, and what makes you special and different from every other party in Guyana.
Actually, there is a lot in common amongst the parties, whether big or small. When you look at the manifestos or some of the proposals that are coming out, we all talk about economic development, reduction in poverty, access to education, you know, more health centers and facilities for treatment of our ailing and elderly population.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, what is missing most of all is the leadership. And with weak leadership, we cannot implement, and we don't show the commitment and determination to abide and commit ourselves to having, let's call it, a contract with the people, where when we have these proposals like reduction in poverty, reduction in unemployment, and for us, one of our major themes is providing tax incentives to open up the economy for trade and investments. Once the parties get in power, probably if they reach 15% of their commitments, the people are fortunate. It transitions into a focus on power and an inner cabal that, in a sense, distances themselves from the people. And this is the predicament which we have faced for decades. So we in Change Guyana, what we want to highlight and bring to the table is the commitment and the determination that we will work with the people, put tax incentives in place that will enhance and ensure economic development across our 10 regions. So in a nutshell, we're saying that our platform is leadership that will give us the kind of economic development that is badly needed,
Mm-hmm.
and will speak to the many social and economic ailments that have kept Guyana at the lower part, the lower part of the GDP per capita in the Caribbean.
Gotcha. Wonderful. Thank you, Nigel. To our viewers out there, Mr. Nigel Hines, who is the Prime Ministerial candidate for Change Guyana. They're focusing on impressing the Guyanese people with leadership, resilient and new leadership, tax incentive for economic development, and a host of other measures that we'll get to in a couple minutes. Gentlemen, I want to throw this into our discussion here. First off, let me move from your own party's agenda and the things you might have thought of. Burning question today is this notion of ID card from GCOM and voters who may not be able to uplift their national ID cards, having the challenge of being disenfranchised by not having the card. what would be your party's position on this matter as it stands today? And I must tell you this, we are certainly hoping next week, Monday, we are going to have a discussion with some of the GCOM officials. We are still hoping to make contact with Mr. Vincent Alexander and some other people. So far, we have gotten confirmation from one or two who said they would be here. But let's talk about the chairman of GCOM's announcement that she could remove names of persons from the PLE who has not uplifted their national ID cards. Any one of you go first. It doesn't matter.
If I may, my first comment
Sure,
is that it is not in keeping with the ruling of the Chief Justice. It removes people from the list who are Guyanese. It will effectively do so, and I am alarmed by such a development.
Wonderful. Any addition, Mr. Durga or Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, the issue here is the constitutionality of the move. Now, if it is that you're entitled to vote by virtue of two things: one, citizenship, and two, the basic inclusion of your name on the NRR, right?
Yep.
The list that will be extracted from the NRR or the PLE, preliminary list of electors, those should not be, there should not be any sort of additional process that imposes upon that. So it's a very strange thing that in which you fulfill these basic requirements.
Correct.
And if you fail to collect an ID card, in keeping with both the previous decision 20 years ago and the current Chief Justice's decision, that you there's this extraneous process that opens the process, I believe, to legal challenge in the future.
Yeah.
On the constitutionality of it.
Correct. I think a lot of things that has happened over the past 3 or 4 weeks have opened, created potential for a lot of problems in the future. Mr. Durga, you have anything that you want to add there?
Yes, what I want to say is that, well, of course, everybody is following this no confidence motion from the beginning and what the result of that is. I must compliment Mr. Anil Nandalal and Dr. Barajagdeo for do the heavy lifting in this whole thing. And I must say, I follow Anil Nandalal's opinion on this, and I agree with him. Coming now to this voters list, I'm at a loss why those 25,000 people didn't uplift their ID cards, because you can vote with an ID card or with a passport. So today on all the discussions and all the blogs was, can you still vote with a valid passport? If so, then not uplifting an ID card, and these ID cards are since 2008, they're not uplifted. So I saw a call of Mr. Jagdev and Mr. Irvan Ali today that people should go and uplift their card, which is a good thing. But if you can vote with your passport, you don't necessarily need the ID card. And so for me, it's not clear what this removal means, because if you're a Guyanese and you can identify yourself, you can vote. So clearing up the list, and if since 2008 you have not uplifted your ID card, that's a serious thing. So in this on this issue, I'm still at a loss why people don't uplift the ID card. Are they still voting with their passport, or did these people migrate? Are they somewhere else and not interested in our politics? Then there should be no problem with removing them. So but concerning that point, I'm not so clear.
But the bigger question is, what's your position? I mean, should people be allowed to vote regardless whether they have that ID card or not?
If you're Guyanese and you can prove that you're Guyanese, you have a constitutional right to vote.
But let me counter you. Let me counter the three of you with another question. Now, how else would a person have gotten onto the voters list?
Well,
in other words, if Ruel's name is on the voters list, but he is not listed as having a form of ID, and he walks in with his passport that has his photo or whatever, how would GCOM then match this Ruel with that Ruel?
Well,
No, you see, people have to understand how we get a voters list.
Right.
First of all, we have is we call it National Registrar of Registrants, right? So that has been established. I can't remember how long ago, about 20 years ago. So. A little bit less. From that NRR, every time there is an elections to come about, they see who from the NRR has reached the age of majority, the age of eligibility to vote. Then from that list, what you do is extract what we call a preliminary list of electors. Now, when the preliminary list of electors is extracted, you have a period we call claims and objections period. That is to ensure that nobody has any fraudulent appearance in the list. That is, it matches a vote is matched to an accurate NRR record. When that process is over, what you have for the purposes of election is an official list of the electors, the OLE. So somebody can't parachute in magically into any of those lists because of the processes that are involved.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I think in previous elections, there has been instances where you could go have somebody swear for you, the usual stuff that you do. But yes, I think by and large, we're all in agreement that there should be no untoward action that can disenfranchise or cause a person not to have the ability to vote. Gentlemen, let me ask you another question. Mr. Durga, you mentioned that you would have supported in principle some of the designs, some of the actions of Anil Nandalal and Bharat Jagdev and so forth. There is this notion, I think it is more popular than people would want us to believe, that the government, that is the cabinet should resign and should resign forthwith. Because there is this suspicion that this fear that monies are continued to be expended willy-nilly and without any accountability and so forth. So I'm going to ask the three of you. I'm going to start with Nigel first, if you don't mind, Nigel. What's your position? Should the cabinet have resigned forthwith? And if he hasn't done it as yet, should not the president call some decorum of decency to the political situation in Guyana?
Well, we've had so many violations of the Constitution since the NCV, the no confidence vote, that it has reached a stage where you've lost count of the constitutional violations. With regard to the cabinet, they were deemed to have resigned by the Chief Justice back in January. They became a plenary subsequently, and then after the CCJ ruling, they once again captioned themselves as the cabinet, and they have somehow merged the Article 106, 6, and 7 and used the term notwithstanding to claim that they are still in the cabinet and not a caretaker status. It is quite obvious that they're in breach of the Constitution to have these so-called cabinet meetings and to continue to act as if nothing has changed. So it's crystal clear that the cabinet should have resigned. The president should have resigned as head of the cabinet, and his status now would have been one of a caretaker president. And all of these cabinet decisions, really are in violation of the Constitution and just in violation also of the CCJ ruling. And it is a very unfortunate situation we're in, even embarrassing situation that we're in. Correct. And the sooner we have elections to once again have a government in place that will adhere to the Constitution, the better it will be for Guyana.
Great. Roel, I want to bring you on next on the same question as to what's your party's position, whether the cabinet should immediately or should have already resigned. Let me quote. Let me refer to a statement made by Dr. Ghani from Trinidad when he brought to the Caribbean, to the region's attention, that when the Minister of Government of Guyana's government would have said that the CCJ cannot tell government of Guyana what to do, that statement alone, that came with no corrective or no suggestive correction from even the president, placed Guyana's position in the entire region as one of basically a laughing stock. So I'm posing a two-faced question to you. One is, should the cabinet resign forthwith? Should they have already resigned? And of course, Guyana's position now with regards to ministers of government saying, well, the CCJ can instruct Guyana government what to do.
All right. Let me just answer the last question first. The CCJ is part of Guyana's sovereign official judicial infrastructure. It's established by law as our highest court. So a CCJ decision is not foreign to Guyana's sovereignty. It's not an imposition on Guyana's sovereignty. This is in the law. Secondly, I've written on this issue before. 1066, which says that cabinet shall resign, comes into immediate effect with regard to and this has been observed by the Chief Justice in original ruling and by the CCJ in their ruling, which is said that the provisions of 106 come into immediate effect.
Correct.
Now, I agree to a certain degree with great degree, with Mr. Nandalal, when he says that the CCJ made a judicially conservative ruling. Now, that said, I understand why the judicially conservative ruling would be made. At the point that the CCJ made the ruling, because of the Court of Appeals ruling that invalidated the NCM, the CCJ had two options. They could have said outright that the NCM was valid retroactively, which would have put us into a state of legal limbo and chaos. What they implied was that, and this is the same reason that the US and the EU treated it as September 18th as a deadline. What they implied in the restraint was that it is not as if we can take it as if absolutely that the December deadline, the December motion and the March 21st deadline were immediately in effect. They gave some leeway as of the June 18th ruling, which is led us to September 18th. Now, the restraint comes from the fact that had the parliamentary parties met and agreed to an extension beyond September 18th, we'd have been not in a state of constitutional limbo.
Correct.
As we are now. Now, the most expansive interpretation of the CCJ ruling, at best, puts the deadline at October 12th, which is just passed, which was the delivery of the final rulings to the consequential orders.
Right.
That haven't come into effect. If it is that we don't consider cabinet have resigned, then it makes a mockery of the purpose of 1066. What people have been doing is conflating 1066 and 1067.
Yeah.
Now, 1066 says, as Nigel said just now, cabinet shall resign. Now, cabinet is a specific organ, a derivative organ of the executive. So the executive is established first, and then from the executive, a subsection of the executive constitutes cabinet. What 1066 does in the wake of an NCM or NCV is that it removes the powers of cabinet from the executive, hence making the executive a caretaker government. What 1067 does is affirm, however, that the entire executive still has 3 months in which it is in lawful authority, unless the provision of the extension takes place.
Correct.
Now, what we have to look forward to and what we have to be cautious about is, in the upcoming months, frankly, is whether or not not just cabinet decisions itself, whether being made or more critically, whether or not an attempt is made to pass a budget, which needs, at some levels, cabinet approval.
Correct. But they don't need to pass a budget. There is some provision that allows them a fraction, a large portion.
No, in the case of the provision that obtains is that in case of a prorogation or dissolution of the assembly, that if you go into a new budgetary year, you cannot spend more than 1/12 of your budget, of the previous year's budget. That is provision. However,
but the operating word there is you cannot. But this government has shown
you legally cannot. No.
Correct. But the government has shown no respect for the legal paradigms.
No, but let me say this. This is important to make note. We are not technically in that position because the constitution is unclear on certain issues. Now, that 1/12 rule only kicks in if there is one or two things: dissolution of the National Assembly, or we're in a state or we are under prorogation of the National Assembly.
Correct.
The National Assembly has neither been dissolved or prorogued.
Okay.
So technically, the National Assembly can vote on issues, including the budget. The question is whether the National Assembly can vote on a budget if the budget is not approved by cabinet.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So Mr. Durga, let me ask you the same question in terms of your party's view of the cabinet, but with a slight twist. You see, the issue here is that, let us just say your party is successful at the polls, and you were asked to form the government of Guyana. What would be your review, legal and otherwise, of the actions taken by the current set of ministers that would have been within this period of time deemed unconstitutional? So one, do you think that the cabinet should resign forthwith? Do you agree with the two other colleagues in the panel discussion? And two, what action would your party take if you were to win the elections?
Okay, I totally agree with the previous speakers. And what I want to say is everybody in Guyana has a smartphone. So the real jurors are the people, and we're on the ground campaigning. And I can tell you that my conclusion is that this government is illegal. We are in a dictatorship. And to answer your question very brief and candid, these ministers and this government, or this pseudo-government, this illegal dictatorial government we have now, has to understand that Soku and Sara are in place. My party, and I'm sure the other new parties as well, and if the PPP has indeed changed, as they're saying, then we should immediately activate them, and all these ministers should be held accountable. They're spending money without any legal ground to spend money, and we should, as a nation, as a people, never allow this level of lawlessness, because that's what it is today, lawlessness. So immediately, Soku and Sara should kick in with competent people, with judges, whether they have to be imported or not, fast track these things, and bring these people to justice, because it's unbearable what is happening at this moment. And I don't want to go in details to tell you how unbearable it is, you understand, because that would take too much of your time.
Right. Well, gotcha. And I think one of the things that viewers out there have been clamoring about is that politicians have, by and large, done whatever they want over the 50 odd years of our independence, and there is little, if anything at all, that can be done, because always there is something about presidential pardons and presidential immunity and cabinets and so forth. And so, to you guys who are now putting a brand new political face to Guyana, the question is that, are you going to eventually fall into the same paradigm? I mean, I'm going to preface, before I ask you to answer, I'm going to say this. A couple of weeks ago, I had Cathy Hughes on this program, and one of the things I asked her was that when you guys were in opposition, you used to have all of these moral talk and all of this talk about governance and corruption and all of that. And when you're in government now, everybody is oddly silent. And her answer was, interestingly, part of her answer was, when you're in opposition is very different from when you're in government. Now,
No.
and I immediately asked her, so wrong is wrong, whether you're in government or opposition. Now, Roel, I'm going to throw this question to you first, because you have been part of the current government, and I think you know you're a social media activist, and you do know that people have this notion that you're still part of the government, and you have never really come out to identify what you believe might be some of the ills or some of the evils as this government has done that would make you not want to go back under this umbrella again.
Now, there are two things. One, I'm still employed with government up until December.
Okay.
Now, because of that, I am ethically restrained from specific commentary on several things. What I have not been shy about, however, is speaking about the issues of governance. I've written on the issue of the the cabinet not resigning thing. What I've said just now is something I've said in a letter a while back.
But you would recall you would have been most vocal in the past when you yourself call on people that if they can't speak out, then they're part of the evil. If they can't identify the corruption of their government, then they're part of the corruption.
Yeah. Again, I've spoken out, and this is I think of all the people currently in the running as such. I've done what I think might be the unprecedented, is that I've spoken out as much as I can, as much as my ethical restrictions would allow me. And government people have said, very frankly, that you can't be on the job and engage in the level of activism I am engaged on. What I shy away from, with regard to any specific pronouncements on, is what the issues that speak to my portfolio, because it would be unethical to do so. However, this hasn't restricted me from saying that, you know what, overall, this system that is going on is not helpful to the Guyanese people. And I guarantee you that come January, I have no ethical restraints, but I have a job to do that I signed on to, which is to bring a national cultural policy to the people of Guyana. I intend to deliver on that promise, not only because it was a campaign promise of an administration I supported, but because it's something that I believed in before the administration came into power. So I owe it to the people of Guyana to stay and deliver that policy to the best of my ability, according to my contractual obligations.
Gotcha. I'm going to pick you up back on that later, probably on another show. Mr. Durga,
but what I should say as well is that what people don't realize, is that there is no restriction serving government and being. I'm not a member of the National Assembly. We haven't had a formal party structure. There are current ministers of government who have served in Parliament while working for the PPP and who have been engaged in campaigning.
Understood. Yeah. But you see, you would have to understand that if you, Nigel, Torain, and other people are proponents of change, then it means that you would be held at a different platform, at a different benchmark than the old politicians that have been there and done it all these years.
Of course, definitely. But if I were to leave government, and which should be noted as well, is that under the PPP, I volunteered my services on various issues as well, despite my fundamental problem, specific to the area of cultural policy. So this is not something new. Yeah.
So let me come, Nigel. I want to ask you. We're going to come back to the economic development of Guyana, and I want to tie that in with oil, because one cannot avoid the question of the impact of oil on Guyana. And your party's vision of an economic development of this country that is tied to oil, because you can't avoid it, but at the same time creating sustainable economic development that can survive without or outside of oil. Over to you.
Well, we have an abundance of natural resources, and now oil has been added in a big way. But we have gold, bauxite, magnesium. We have forestry, and other areas that an economy can run on. There are some countries that have 1/10 of the natural resources that we have and have managed to sustain their economy in the top tier of the developed countries in the world. In terms of oil and the current situation, we have a production sharing agreement that is a cause for concern, and we feel that it needs to be. We will have to have a public international lawyers to renegotiate that contract.
So you're underlining a fact that you were going to call for reopening and reassessment and probably renegotiation of the oil contracts.
Well, this will be done in a manner where it's not just that a unilateral severing of the agreement.
Agree. So you're doing assessment first.
Together, we will have our representative of international experts to sit with the contractors and review the clauses of the contract that touch on issues like royalties, the stabilization clause, ring fencing, and many other clauses that we feel are not advantageous or fair to the Guyanese people. But it will be based on the examination and the legal review done by the international experts.
Okay.
That will guide how we deal with the current PSA.
Gotcha. All right, Mr. Durga, let me come to you, and then I'll come to Ruel last on the same question. Economic development vis-a-vis oil, but sustainable economic development with or without oil. Over to you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't like the inclination that lawyers should be negotiating a contract. The contract must be negotiated by entrepreneur business people who understand business, and lawyers should be in the support group to make sure that it's tied according to the law. So that's a fundamental difference I have with all these accountants and lawyers, especially this government, the so-called lawyers who are making contracts and they don't know nothing about business. That's one. The second thing is that the oil windfall, if it will be there, the oil windfall, you have to use that money to create a sustainable economy. And our future is in agriculture. And anybody who wants to know why that is so, read the Roadmap to Prosperity. I want to give one simple example. Let us compare Guyana to Dubai. When the UAE found oil, they had 750,000 people, camels and sand and an oasis. Guyana has 750,000 people, world-class oil finds. We have gold, bauxite, and the whole list Mr. Hines already named there. And honestly, I'm sick and tired of hearing what we have, because while we have all of that, our people have not. So it's time that and I'm for that, shrewd business people, entrepreneurs, translate our economy in a vibrant economy, because a vibrant economy will sustain proper social programs, not the other way around. I'm tired of hearing about all these social programs and the promises are being made, and especially to the youth. And I'm guilty of that too. But then I beg for forgiveness, because the last election we tell the youth we would take care of them. In the manifesto, we have said we would immediately implement the agriculture bank and so forth to bring back agriculture. And the basic thing which I'm looking very keenly at is that our sovereign wealth fund has a name. It's called the Development Bank of Guyana. A lot of people think that people flock down to the UAEs to invest there and so forth. Let them research it. People went there because they could borrow money at a 0% interest under the condition that they invest in the country.
Got you. So you made a very good point that you know it requires the entrepreneurs to look at certain parts of the contracts to ensure that we are getting value, and then you bring in the lawyers to ensure that the legal language is there. Ruel, I'm going to bring you on at this point to talk about the same sustainable economic development. But before we go there, Nigel and Mr. Durga, I didn't mention this before, but to both of your points that you made, the truth is that the local content policy, or the lack of local content policy, is amazing in this country, and I'm shocked that there is not enough public outcry from all of you and all the other small parties and everybody who wants to be in politics about this rotten deal, that so that not only we are not getting the oil revenues, but nothing at the bottom level comes to the Guyanese. And the last thing I'll say before I come over to you, Ruel, is the other side to what you mentioned, Mr. Durga, the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Guess what? The minister has God Almighty powers to determine what happens to that fund. And no way in the future should that be allowed to happen, because they've screwed it in the past, they're screwing it presently, and they will in the future. Over to you, Ruel. Sorry for carrying on a little bit about it.
No, they sell us out. That's a major crime to the people of Guyana. They sell us out.
Correct.
And that has to be reversed.
Let's hear what Ruel has to say about this point.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the couple of things. One, with the local content policy, this is something we're actively studying, because we are not only looking at saying that this is wrong. We want to propose solutions to fix it. So this is why we've been conservative in the public pronouncements we've made. We also start studying the SWF, and just beyond the basic prescriptions therein, we are looking at concrete plans. For example, when it comes to the investment aspect of the SWF, we want to have a structure in place that says a certain figure, let's say 10%, has to be invested in local equity in new industries. 20% should be invested in the region, including what we are proposing is sort of a new Petro-Carib type initiative. And then the remaining 60%, we invest globally in investments that work, following the models here that Norway, for example, has followed and reap rewards from. Now, with regard to industries outside of the oil and gas, which is too little focus on right now in general, we're looking at certainly the agriculture. But our focus in agriculture is primarily, before anything else, food security. You have to invest in bringing down our food import bill. Then we look at agriculture for export. And,
well, you know,
foreign
well,
exchange
when you talk food import bill, a lot of Guyanese get a little, they experience a little shudder, right? Because this thing
Of
about
course,
food
of course.
import bill is always
Yeah.
viewed in the wrong way.
Yeah. But we have to look at the. Of course, every policy has to look at the cultural issues attached to it. But one area that I want to see personally develop has to do with the we call the orange economy, the creative industries economy. In fact, I'm due to speak at a conference being held here by Caribbean Export next month on the creative industries and the thing. Now, there's been a shocking across administrations ignoring of the value of creative industries when currently globally they've shown a higher growth rate than most other economic sectors. In the UK, between 2015 to 2016, it was 7.6%, as opposed to 3.5% for the economy as a whole. It outdid the automotive industry, life sciences, aerospace, as well as oil and gas, creative industries. We have done nothing to focus on them. So that's going to be a key pillar of our economic diversification. And of course, we're going to tie it into both the tourism as well as our commitment to sustainable development. Creative industries are, in fact, done right, a sustainable industry that doesn't depend on resources, any sort of resources. And of course, we look at other services, economic services, that we can use, that we leverage our oil wealth and using Guyana as a hub for.
Correct.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Let me swing right around back to elections. I'm going to ask you, maybe a yes or no question, but it has to do with the history of Guyana and people's mindset. I mean, look, the truth is that the hesitancy is probably a silly word to use, but the hesitancy of David Granger to follow his own words immediately after the NCV, to call elections forthwith, have led to a lot of conspiracy theories out there. My question to you three gentlemen, now that you are active in the political paradigm with your own parties, do you think there is a likelihood of a rigged election in Guyana? You don't have to explain. You could say yes or no, or if you want, spend a couple of words to explain. Let's go with you first, Mr. Durga.
Well, for me, it's simple. There is reason to believe, given the activities of GCOM and what Mr. Lowenfield is doing, there's valid reason to believe that everything is being done to rig the election. Let me put it in this perspective. In my opinion, and the opinion of many in the party I support, if there is no credible third force coming up, the PPP will win by default, because the people don't trust this government anymore for good reason. They're untrustworthy. And the thing is that with that given, you understand, and that's my personal opinion, even I would want to have respect for the two-party system which was put in place. Because don't forget that the list system, to vote on a list, was done with consensus of those two old parties. So they want this two-party system and they don't want smaller parties. So these new parties have to make sure that they work together, or at least make sure that none of the older party get a majority. For me, the PPP, the reason why I cannot support them is that in the rice sector, where I was the one who exposed the corruption, nothing has been done. Prosecutors forget to come to the court, and that sort of thing. For me, that is either a payoff or corruption at the highest level. So what does that mean? In the PPP, those people who have done those atrocities are still there. So how can I trust them? So my hope is on the new generation. And to answer your question, will this election be rigged? It cannot be rigged if all of us are vigilant.
Correct.
Vigilant, vigilant, vigilant. And that is what we have. Because these are different times. Email works, WhatsApp works, everything works. So if you're vigilant, this is where my respect comes for Anil Nandalal and Dr. Jagdeo, although I'm not supportive of their party, but they're doing an excellent job in keeping us awake that we need to be vigilant that they don't rig the election, because yes, I think that is exactly what their intentions are.
Okay. Roel?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think three levels of the answer. First of all, whatever disagreements I may have with current administration, I don't believe that is in the character for them to try to rig. I won't disagree that some elements within the administration might intellectually consider the benefits of it, but I don't think that it is in the character to rig. Secondly, I don't believe that even if the intention were there, and let me add to the first part, and if the intention were there wouldn't have been just kicking the can down the road with elections. There would have been elections called, and there would have been a rigged. Now, the second part of it, well, my answer is that the technology that exists at present, both within the system of voting, as well as the independent monitoring technology, whether it's WhatsApp, etc., will not allow for the vast conspiracy that it would take to rig an election to happen. Thirdly, as Mr. Dorga pointed out, even if rigging the technology were available and the intention were there, this sort of mutually assured good behavior by both parties are sort of solace that if anyone was intended rig, the other one would be watching. So when you had the initial issue, for example, I think last election, the election before that, with regard to the chief elections officer and curious miscalculation, Vincent Alexander picked it up, which would have resulted in the vote going another way.
Correct.
So for those three things, I think mitigate against the possibility of rigging.
Got you. But I would beg to differ on the earlier point you made. If rigging, and I hear you, rigging might not be in the intellectual thinking and platform of many of the more modern thinkers of the day. But yeah. I think because of the delay from NCM to now, people are thinking, well, they now want time to put measures in place, and this has led to this big conspiracy. Nigel, let's come to you with the same question. Do you think there is a likelihood of elections being rigged in Guyana, the 2020 elections? And I'm going to ask you part two of that question. Do you believe elections will be held in March 2nd, 2020?
Well, I want to go back quickly to the issue of the public internationalized and the role they play. It's a particular term that they use for multinationals and disagreements between countries and multinationals. And they are the cornerstone in terms of remedying and negotiating disagreements between countries and multinationals. So you don't look at these public internationalized like you look at a regular lawyer. These firms are reputable international legal firms that deal with issues that might occur in any industry, including the oil and gas industry. That's to Mr. Douglas' point on the lawyers. With regards to the elections and rigging, the rigging can take place at so many levels. That is why there was so much concern about household registration that was as ruled constitutional, but it could not have been completed before the time that the government was considered illegal, I think September the 18th. So the 270 or 374,000 persons that were registered that was, a entire waste of time. And but the point being made, that was an effort to probably generate a new list, or even take an unfair advantage of because of the control of the current government of the GCOM machinery. The list of itself, the OLE, the official list of electors, if that is compromised, there is rigging there. And we're talking about some significance, not a 1% or a 2%. Because we have rigging, I think, to some extent, even in the United States of America. It's at some marginal level. So the rigging can take place pre-election, during the actual voting, or even at the point of counting of the elections, at the point of counting and the announcement of the elections. So to use one of the term used by one of the guests is that we have to be vigilant all through the process as it's being done. Well, particularly by the major opposition party. So it's not just it's not just the whether they'll be rigging or not. Right. It's to be vigilant. But my sense is with the mechanisms that were put in place, the rigging, there are two points at which rigging can take place. Not in the voters' booth, not in the counting due to the scrutineers that will be present, but in the list that is finalized. If that is compromised, if you have a lot of persons removed from the list, that would be a form of rigging. And then even though results are placed at each polling station, if the chief elections officer gets up and says that X party wins, and it doesn't tally with what is enumerated across the country at the 2,000 plus polling stations, that result will carry as the official result, and then there will be an appeal that probably will last another 4 years, and it will amount to a form of rigging.
Correct.
So that's my.
Let me. Yes, Joel, go on.
Yeah.
Yes, Rose.
Now, Nigeria bring up an important point. Now, we have to make a distinction between rigging in the sense that we understand that the will of the people is not accurately reflected in the actual outcome, in any sort of accuracy, and initiatives meant to affect who gets the vote. Now in the US, you have issues like gerrymandering, voter registration laws that impact minorities primarily. You have laws that overwhelmingly impact a certain level of citizens. For example, former convicts in some states are not allowed to vote. Let me be very frank. What is currently going on at GCOM is, and not with the commissioners, I don't intend to impugn the commissioner, the chair in any way, but you have a political battle going on at GCOM. And the key aspect of it that is under dispute, is being interrogated, is the issue of residency. There's the theory that the opposition's support, a key section of the opposition's support, exists overseas and they only fly in to vote. And that number of voters is significant. There's a theory that goes on. Now, if it is that let's say the house registration issue came in, then it would have affected that subset of voters. If it is that you have a residency requirement, it would have affected that subset of voters. Now, if it is that you have a limited time to come and pick up your ID card, if you're on the NRR or a previous list, that will affect that substantive voters. Nobody's going to fly in once to collect the ID card and then flying again to vote. It's a cost attached to that. So that was a play here. But I don't believe that there is an attempt at rigging in the sense that we had before with one party collecting 85% of the vote unrealistically.
Okay. So, Roel, do you believe that elections will be held in March 2020?
There's only one way that elections can be postponed after March, and that is if GCOM, in its own deliberation, says that there is some extenuating circumstance that allows it to invoke 160(1)(2) of the Constitution, which allows GCOM to postpone the elections. I don't see currently any such situation existing, or can conceivably exist, short of some act of God.
Mr. Durga, do you think elections will be held in March?
Well, as the last thing I saw was an interview with Gordon Mosley with the president, and the president named the 2nd of March the magic date.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hold him to that, and I can tell you this, that if they don't keep the election the 2nd of March, we're in for some serious problems in this country, and we should avoid that. Always. Everybody should work together to avoid that, because this government has no credibility anymore. But I want to pedal back just for a minute to make something clear, which is, in my view, I think is very important, and the people I support. One of the things is that in a business concept, Mr. Lowenfield would be fired for not doing a job, because his job is to, at a given date of notice, to have a credible election in 3 months, is well funded to do that, and he didn't deliver. Why is Mr. Lowenfield still there? He should be fired. You understand? And this is the whole thing. With today's technology, what we have, please, if they fire Lowenfield and the international community, and we have to call on these people, and let me put it in Guyanese terms, to put a zombie lash on Mr. Granger, to have it done. Because if you fire Lowenfield and you bring in professionals, this whole list and this nonsense going on, they will fix it in 2 weeks with the technology at our hand. The other thing I want to say, and I want to insert that because we keep looking over it, is that when I hear people talking about the exports here and the exports there and so forth, I happen to be on most of the diaspora blog. This country is blessed with a diaspora so educated. But if we don't respect them and we don't invite them to come back and help us, you understand, then we're not going to get nowhere. So that is what we have to look at. We have the expertise, we have the people. The question is, are we willing to bring those experts back home, or are we doing what for 60 years have been done, that the local governments, the local politicians seems to be afraid of these educated people?
Correct.
So
well, you made a good point there, Mr. Durga, that indeed the bank of diaspora intelligence is there for us to draw from. There's another interesting point, though, that, frankly speaking, I'm shocked that Roel found a job with his government, because there are qualified Guyanese living here that don't get a break, because you're not ready to drink from the political beverage being supplied by any of the parties. So people are not incentivized. I mean, students coming off University of Guyana, and that's where I want to go next. What's your party's vision for education, and how are we gonna make Guyana live up to its potential to be the most educated country in the region, and not just the region, South American continent? So let's touch a little bit on education. Mr. Durga, you go first.
Yes. So this is the whole thing, and that is why I support this young group of people without any hesitation. And Mr. Roel Johnson know that because we had lengthy talks with him. So while I feel he comes more from a social perspective, I like these young people who are highly educated. A lot of them are doctors. They're dealing with the people on the ground. They see the misery and so forth. So I'm saying, please, and I'm calling on my generation, give these young people a break and let us guide them. Because we, the older generation, have failed them. We have promised them in the last election that we put them first. We didn't. So all these people coming from UG and so forth, what is it, 1,500? Where are you going to give them a job? And this is where I keep saying that agriculture is our future. Oil is a God gift to us. If we make sure that that gift which is given to us, we translate it, avoid a Dutch disease here, and stimulate agriculture, then we're home free. But what do we see today? Agriculture, the cartel in the rice industry continue. The farmers, the flooding, those rice fields which are flooded, trust me, I want to see how they're going to help those people. But it's not only that. For 3 crops, their production is screwed because of the salt.
Mr. Durga, just to make an insertion there, I'm sorry. I think there is a statement out there already that the government has responded to people being flooded, that they can't help them because the PPP didn't go back into parliament to vote some money. so the opposition seems to be tagged with the blame there. But thank you for your insights on the education, because Ruel, I want to come to you next with the educational aspect of development, because I think you would know what I'm talking about when I'm saying there are lots of Guyanese here that don't feel empowered to be. I mean, you're being told to go sell planet chips, and that's fine, but I mean, not all of us could sell planet chips, and who's going to buy it? But in terms of incentivizing or not incentivizing and inspiring people to be educated means that you have to do something. No need you bring Ruel Johnson from North America to take a job here and somebody goes to university but has to leave this country to find a job over there. It cannot work. It's a vicious cycle that we've been trapped in for a long time.
Yeah. So one of our 6 pillars is very specifically, and it's one of our central pillars, is education and human resource development. And we have several initiatives under that. The first one is we call National Education Standards and Certification, within which we will be looking critically at curriculum reform. We need to have a system in place that equip our young people practically with the opportunities that are there for them. I was speaking to a young woman up to about an hour ago who did marketing, she did accounting, etc. And she went through about 2 or 3 jobs before she finally just settled for a low level accounting job in which there isn't much opportunity to grow.
Right.
She told me about her sister, who she calls the bright one, who excelled at UG, excelled in accounting, got a scholarship to India, came back, and was given a job at a local state firm. And because she didn't sort of conform to the politicization, which is not an element of that is crippling human resource development. And this is in the previous administration, I should know. She eventually left the job, took sponsorship, and she's been about 5 years now in Canada, which means we lost another critical person, which is about contributes to 80% of.
So your party is going to be aggressive with education and retention of educated persons here, right?
Yeah, because what we currently don't have in place is a forward planning approach.
Correct.
That says, okay, these are the industries that are going to develop in the next 5 or 10 years, because we have a development plan. Let's say we have a development plan that we have that focuses on creative industries, right? The orange economy. What we will do is ensure that we guide from the beginning by viable arts education program in school and certification of the current post-secondary arts education programs into there's also creative industry entrepreneurship coming on stream, so that our target, let's say we want to have, let's say, I know, 70 creative industry initiatives that we help to greenhouse in 5 years. We will start saying that we need a cohort of, say, 5% of graduates to focus in these areas that add to this creative industry stuff.
Thank you.
Oil and gas.
Thank
we
you.
knew oil and gas was coming on board.
Right.
We did not immediately start streamlining people into.
But also, and I'm going to football this question over to Nigel. But also, Nigel, the whole, because I know you guys embrace education and educational development and so forth too. But I think also what's needed is the government should not be competing with private sector. Because then employment becomes like what it is now, very subjective and not objective. Yes. So Nigel, over to you in terms of your party's aggression, where youth empowerment, where education is concerned, and the creation of industries that can then provide for this new army of educated persons to come in.
One of the key pillars that we have for teachers is that there should be no taxes on teacher salaries. So that's one of the ways we intend to incentivize them through the tax system. And we feel this is crucial because what has happened in Guyana over the past decade and more is that students are not really taught in the schools, but at lessons. And those are the more fortunate students who can afford the lessons. Right. And I think this has caused our education system to deteriorate greatly. Mm-hmm. And that is why you have almost like a huge education gap. We still top the Caribbean in the CXC and the CAPE exams, but that's just a few of our students are in the top tier, but our performances compared to the rest of the Caribbean in math and English is in the bottom tier. So aside from incentivizing the
and politics,
we have to have that national education standard that goes across from primary school to high school that will allow for persons to realize their potential.
Great.
And then also the kind of training that is needed for those who might not, be at the top of the class in terms of skills training in plumbing and joinery and carpentry. Those things will go a long way towards enriching our education system.
Great. Thank you. So, gentlemen, it's been great to have you on board tonight. We're running out of program time. Before we go, let me tell you, we ran a poll that asked the viewers whether they would support a new party in 2020 elections, and 100% of respondents have said yes. So I think you have some 100%. Good hope. Yeah,
they might be rigging there.
I think you have some good hope there. But I'm gonna go to you, Ruel, first. 30 seconds. Final words.
Yeah. I've seen a great deal of opposition with regard to the supposed viability of new parties. That has actually given me hope that the opposition is actually reflective of the fear that the current system has with regard to the possibility of new parties making a dent. And I think the fear should be justified. It's justified. And as somebody today told me, we're not looking at a revolution per se, but we're looking at the evolution of our politics. And this, what we're seeing currently, parties that represent youth, business, indigenous people, this is unprecedented in our history. This has never happened before at the same time. So people should take note.
Thank you. I'm going to go to you next, Nigel. 30 seconds, final words.
Well, what has kept Guyana in an economic downturn is the political divisiveness, which started since, 1955. and it has really never changed. We have two parties which you can largely see as tribal parties, and the divisiveness that has caused has damaged this country in immeasurable ways. So if a middle force can make the change, can bring people together, can unite Guyanese, that's the kind of change that we need to advance this country. And if it requires a multitude of parties coming together that will have the leverage in Parliament to do what is best for all Guyanese, that's the change we need, and that's what we need now, instead of having the one or the other of these parties managing governance in a way that is generally divisive and not pro-Guyanese, not sharing the benefits or governing in a manner that covers all 10 regions, covers all demographics, regardless of your race, religion, or the region you're from.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Durga, for final words, 30 seconds. Let me just correct. I actually got the wrong data with me. So the correct statistics for the poll: would you support a new party in the 2020 elections? 44% yes, 56% no. Mr. Durga, final words, 30 seconds.
Okay, I quickly want to say that for education, I've heard many intellectual exercises about that. My opinion is that Guyanese, and you see it everywhere, that's why we have so much intellectuals, have made sure that their children are very well educated. What we need is jobs. And what I hear clear on the ground is that people want to feel money in their pockets. So we have to create jobs, and that is what we are about. We know how to create the jobs. The projects are there, but the question is, do we have the will to execute those projects? And the good thing today is that we have the money today. I disagree with bankers or business people who say that we don't have a credit rating as Guyana. I always answer them for what I have, and today oil and the investments, you see what we're having. We have a AAA credit rating. For the refinery, I had half an hour with a bankers meeting and I got it financed. So we have everything. We have everything here. So I'm telling Guyanese, we're upbeat. We can do it, but we must have the courage to listen to what a man told me, and he's called the bridge man. He said, there are no poor countries in the world. There are only poorly managed countries. So the management we have today and over the last 50 years, we need to change that. We need to change that. And that is why I'm saying support a new party.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, Roel, Turin Durga, Nigel Hines, thank you all for being here tonight. I must express heartfelt gratitude to Devin, our technical guy, who's made everything possible behind the scenes. You don't see Devin, but it's his work that we're, all of his hard work, the success for which we are on screen. Let me thank the viewers for being with us tonight. Thank Nohar Singh and the entire Globespan team. Now, just before we break company tonight, let me ask you a question that might be an unfortunate question. You don't have to answer, but the answer should be yes, no, maybe. Would you collate?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
With the small parties, to be clear, but yes.
Yes, with you together. Would you guys consider possibility of coming together?
I will answer it this way. We will not collate with the larger parties.
Okay. Thank you. And have a great night. We're going to do a follow-up sometime soon. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Good.